Good evening. Welcome to our event this evening. My name is Meryl Fury. I am a registered nurse and I am president and CEO of Plant-Based Nutrition Movement. Tonight, we are going to be exploring a subject I think that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. We are working in conjunction with Plant Pure Communities. We have some great guests, and the subject is basically food and mood. What can we do to work with our children to make sure that we're feeding them well to keep them healthy, both physically and really emotionally? So here's the big questions for you that we're going to be looking at this evening. Do you have a child or children who experience big feelings? Does your child have difficulty with focus or concentration or impulsivity? Or what about abrupt changes in their moods? Do they have reports of anxiety or sadness or their challenges in school with sitting still? Is it hard to understand why your child acts the way they do? Or do you ever feel like, wow, that is exactly how I used to be when I was a kid? Or, wow, they get that from me. If you find yourself answering yes to any of these questions or wondering what you could be doing differently to support your child, this is the conversation for you. Tonight, we have a lot to say about what kids eat, and that's every day, actually. We're making recommendations, we're making decisions, and sometimes we don't even know what we're recommending or what we're deciding on. We have this sort of blanket understanding of what food is based on what we get told by commercials, and maybe that's not the best choice for our children. So tonight we're talking with three professionals with deep experience in kids, food, and mood. Let me introduce them. First one who will be speaking first is Dr. Elizabeth Winings. Now, there she is. She's in sunny Florida, much different than where I am in dreary Wisconsin. Welcome, Dr. Winings. She's board certified as a family mental health psychiatric nurse practitioner. She's a full-time assistant professor of nursing at the Jacksonville University Keigwin School of Nursing. She also has advanced training in plant-based nutrition, completing her doctoral internship in nutrition and lifestyle medicine at True North Health Center in Santa Rosa, California. She's founder of Winings Wellness, an outpatient private practice that provides mental health care with an emphasis on screening, prevention, and early intervention. Dr. Winings practices evidence-based care, including psychotherapy, conservative use of medication when needed, and nutritional guidance. Dr. Winings also serves as co-medical director for nutrition and lifestyle immersions for the Plant Strong Retreat team. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Winings. We are too excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited as well. And I'm going to just get my slides, I'm going to pull those up, and I will have my screen ready for you all. Okay. So one of the reasons I am so thrilled to be having this conversation tonight is not just because I'm passionate about children and nutrition and their moods. It's because when I was going through my training and I wanted to do my doctoral research on this very subject, I was told that it wasn't an option because at that time there wasn't enough data to support this conversation. And it's thrilling that almost 10 years later, not only are we having the conversation, but the data is available to support it. So let's dive in. What are the neurological, biological things that underline what we eat and how we feel? Our objectives for this conversation are going to be to actually define food and nutrition. It's important when we're talking about things that we have common understanding and that we're not just speaking with cultural understandings, but that we have a common definition. I'd also like to identify the neuroanatomy that underlies emotions. And I'm going to try not to go in the weeds. It is something that's really helpful, though, when we understand the actual anatomy that underlies our feelings. Then we'll discuss that relationship between what we eat and how we feel, as well as start to review some of the language that can support a healthy relationship with food, not only for us as individuals, but also for children. And this applies whether or not you're a parent. If you are an adult who interacts with children, the way that we approach food matters. And so I want to introduce some concepts to you. So food, what is it? I'm sure each of you has an answer that pops into your mind when I ask this question. What is food? Our understanding has a couple of different entry points, but for tonight, we'll just think about the basic parts of what food is. It has macronutrients, so those are the things that you hear individuals discuss, such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, as well as micronutrients. They don't necessarily get as much attention, but that's the salt, vitamins, and minerals that make up food. We also have fiber and water. Fiber is the unsung hero of food, and there's so much more research that's coming out about fiber and the benefit that it plays within not only our gut, but also for our neurotransmitters. So macronutrients, this is where our energy comes from. And someone some time ago with wonderful mathematic brain came up with these equations that helped us understand how much energy different types of macronutrients provided for our bodies. However, along the way, this concept of calories has become quite muddy, and it's actually really stressful for a lot of people. And so I would like to propose that we delete calories from the conversation. It's important to understand that food provides energy for our body to function, but we don't need to get hung up there. That's not where the conversation needs to live. If all we needed to know is energy in equaled energy out, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. And I don't think that as a society, we would have so many difficult relationships with food. So what I would like for you to do is delete the concept of calories. We don't need them for a relationship with food. Micronutrients, again, those are those smaller pieces of food that we don't always hear about. There's more and more conversation around antioxidants and different types of vitamins and minerals, and you might actually hear a lot of people discuss drinking supplements or taking vitamins and minerals, but we actually can get all that we need from eating whole foods, eating food that grows on a tree, grows in the ground, is harvested. And this is the most important part of food that is supporting our cells on a very small level. It's helping us fight infection and build healthy building blocks for our neurotransmitters and other parts of our body. But for the sake of tonight, we're really focusing on that neurotransmitter piece because that is what underlies our feelings. Again, that fiber is so important for a healthy microbiome. We need that network of rough tissue that is not going to be broken down in our system. And it lays there in our gut and provides this beautiful place for bacteria to grow and do the work that it needs to do. This is important not only for neurotransmitters, but also for fighting infections and other aspects. And we won't go in the weeds there, but if you haven't heard about the gut-brain connection, I would encourage you to jot that down. And if you're interested in this conversation and maybe having another viewpoint, that is a great place to spend some time. Water. Oh my goodness, water. How important is that to a healthy body? We absolutely need to be well hydrated, and this is key in children. If there's one thing that I teach to every single patient and family that I work with, it's drink more water. Before we start talking about things that we might want to trade or potentially remove from the diet, such as sugary beverages or caffeinated beverages, we really want to focus on just increasing water. This adds so many benefits, and it's essential to our body's function and overall health. So that's food. It's made up of macronutrients, micronutrients, fiber, water, and all of these things. But what does that mean? What is nutrition? Because a lot of times we hear those words used interchangeably, but they're actually a little different. Nutrition underlines nourishment. And nourishment is the food or other substances that are necessary for our body's growth, health, and good condition. There's a lot of language around food, and there's a lot of labeling of food. Good food, bad food, healthy food, unhealthy food, fat, unfat, low fat. carb, keto, paleo. There's so many words that have been attached to food, and it can be really confusing. If we shift our view to focusing on nourishment, is this food or other substance necessary for my growth, health, and good condition? It can clear things up. When you're looking at something, a bowl of blueberries versus a bowl of blue raspberry candy, one of those is going to provide nourishment to your body. The other is not. And so it's a way to start making choices based on the content of food, apart from calories, and focusing on health and well-being. The quality of nutrition does matter. It is important to define what a healthy, nutritious intake looks like. Healthy food is real food, so things that are fruits, veggies, whole grains, minimally processed, water. It would be really challenging to eat a 100% raw diet and feed that to your children, or convince kids that that's a great way to start eating if they have been eating a standard American diet or are used to eating food that is not raw. Unhealthy foods are typically processed. What I mean by processed is something that is in a bag, a box, potentially in the freezer, as well as from a fast food restaurant. Not all restaurants serve processed foods, but things that are fried or have a lot of salt or sugar typically are not going to provide a high level of nourishment to our bodies. So when we're thinking about that quality of nutrition, we want to think, is this food in its most natural state? Or has something been changed about it? Has it been processed, fried, or altered in a way that might not nourish my body? These are conversations that I have with children, and it helps them think critically about the choices that they're making without a sense of guilt or shame. It's an objective question. Is that apple in its most natural form, or has it been turned into something not natural, like apple pie? Doesn't mean you can't have apple pie, but it just means there's a difference in taking an apple and biting it versus eating an apple that has been combined with sugar, potentially butter, salt, and other things that might not add as much nourishment compared to a plain apple. Okay, so that's kind of a skeleton for food and nourishment. And I want you to hold on to that because now we're going to talk about feelings. Where do our feelings come from? I'm not sure how many of you feel like you can articulate what your feelings are clearly most of the time. Like, I feel excited because I get to talk to you about food. Or I feel nervous because I'm giving a presentation. It's quite hard, even as adults with fully formed brains, to tune in to what we feel most of the time. It is exponentially more difficult for children to tune into their feelings. But our feelings come from our nervous system. And in this image, you can see the yellow brain and that spinal cord. And it's the central nervous system. That is the powerhouse of our body. From that central nervous system, we have our peripheral nervous system. And this is how our body is communicating back and forth. So our brain is sending information out to our body, and our body is sending information back to our brain. It's wonderful and it's intricate, and a lot is happening all at the same time. The brain is a control center of our body, and it's made up of millions of neurons. Neurons are different than neurotransmitters. Neurons are the signaling parts of the brain. So that's what's communicating. And the neurotransmitters are going between the neurons. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But the brain in and of itself is responsible for the vital functions that keep us alive. Those vital functions, again, if you can picture that image with the yellow and pink, it's taking in sensory information. So what we touch, what we taste, what we hear, what we see, what we smell, that is all getting communicated to our brain, and then it's making sense of it. It's processing that information. And then the brain is creating thoughts, feelings, storing our memories. It also sends out those motor signals that tell us to breathe or move our body, get up and run, sit still and rest. One of the things that the brain does that is very remarkable is it holds our body in a steady state or equilibrium. So without even thinking about it, you're breathing. Your body is at an appropriate temperature, unless you have an illness, you might get a fever. But again, the brain is regulating to treat infection, and that temperature will go up to help you. Our brain is supposed to tell us when we're hungry or full, as well as process hormonal responses. The challenge is that vital function of knowing whether we're hungry or full can be altered when we're eating food that's not in its natural state, when it doesn't have all of those components of fiber and water that will trigger those systems within our body to say, I'm all full, thank you so much, I don't need anything else. When we remove fiber, or when we add salt or add oil or other things that make food extra delicious, it tricks our brain into eating more than what our body actually needs, and that can create confusion. If you look where the blue arrow is pointing, that part of the brain is called the amygdala. And if you make a fist and you cover your thumb, it's another way to think about how deep in the brain the amygdala lives. It's this tiny little part of our brain, and it's close to that central command center. This is what some scientists call our old brain, or the reptilian brain. This is what is going to be activated when our body feels scared, nervous, angry, or threatened. It's also what helps trigger that fight or flight system. It's going to get us out if we need to survive. And it's also the part of our brain that can be responsible for long-term stress. So when we have long-term stressors or things that make us feel scared or nervous, this is that part of the brain that holds those memories. Why that's important is because when we're creating conditioned responses, if I do this, then that will happen, we can have this part of our brain get activated around food or emotions related to food. And we have to actually unlearn those responses. If there happens to be damage to the amygdala, it can actually create difficulty for individuals to create memories or to store new information. And so that's important, because the reality is some individuals might have head injury or concussion, or you might notice that there's been a change in a child's ability to do certain things, or maybe they're seeming more irritable. It's always important to be mindful. Is there something actually underlying this response that is out of the child's control? A lot of times when we hear that children are frustrated or irritable or angry, we jump to this idea that they have control over that big emotion. The reality is they might not. It might be an autonomic response from the center of their brain that's trying to protect them if they're perceiving something to be threatening or scary. And it might sound silly, but sometimes food feels threatening or scary if it's new or it's not something that a child likes. And if we can separate this idea that a child is responding on purpose to something to say, I wonder if their brain is perceiving this as something scary, it helps us be more curious and respond in helpful ways, as opposed to engaging in a power struggle and making this situation more difficult for a child. The brain has this really cool part called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex that grows later in life. Unfortunately, little children don't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex. That's why they need help with stopping and thinking and making complex decisions. But what's important about this part of the brain is it actually can override the amygdala. It's where an individual might notice something is really scary and difficult, but they're able to think, okay, I can try new things. I'm okay. I don't need to turn on my fight or flight, and start to have more of that conversation with themselves. Again, this is something that is really challenging, and younger children are not great at it. This part of the brain is what's getting input about what's happening in the environment around an individual, and it helps them make a plan about how they'd like to respond to their stressors or their external environment. And what I want you to hear out of all of this neuroanatomy talk is that when we do something courageous or brave. It helps grow this part of the brain. And it's really important to give children and adolescents opportunities to be brave, to set them up for success, and help them learn that they can do new scary things and that they're okay. And each time that they do that, they're actually exercising this part of the brain. So what are those components? So that's kind of the parts of the brain that are activated when we're having something scary, nervous, new happen, as well as something brave and courageous and helping us grow our ability to try new things. What's happening within that emotional response? Well, there's three basic components. The behavior, so muscle movements. If we're talking about food, I don't know how many of you have seen kids put up a literal muscle movement, no thank you, or yuck, sticking out their tongue. There's an autonomic response, right? That sense of, I don't want that, or maybe even gagging. And then there's a hormonal response. So when we have something stressful occur, we have stress hormones that get released. This can create a loop or a conditioned response. And it takes time to push pause on those loops and unlearn them. And it's important, again, that we're curious and compassionate towards children if they're struggling in their relationship with food or in their willingness to try new things. There's a lot of things happening within their system that they may not have control over. So how is all of this related? How are foods related to feelings? And apart from what's happening within the brain, how does what we eat actually impact what our brain can do? Well, food is foundational for feelings. Whole foods, remember, things that come out of the ground, off the trees, off of a plant, that are not stripped of all of their fiber, so brown rice, not white rice. Whole foods have all of the components and building blocks that we need to build the neurotransmitters that our brain uses to communicate and to support healthy feelings. So some of the neurotransmitters that underline the core symptoms of moods or clinical diseases such as depression, anxiety, ADHD are acetylcholine, GABA, glutamate, dopamine, serotonin, histamine. When we're eating healthy whole foods, we can actually support our body's ability to produce the right amounts of these neurotransmitters. So I just want to show you a couple images. And these images are from an amazing research study. It's the first one in my list of references if you'd like to read it or learn more. You'll notice in some of these images, there are some processed foods, but for the sake of our conversation, I want you to look where there are whole foods. So if you look at the acetylcholine image, you can see that there's a ton of whole foods. It's important to know that histamine has actually been related to the negative responses for mood. So if you're having high intake of food or products that contain histamine, you're actually increasing your risk for negative mood. Then if you look for serotonin, there are so many foods, the starchy foods like potatoes, bananas, papaya, passion fruit, pineapples, kiwis, so many yummy things. And dopamine. Oh, also for serotonin, coffee and hazelnuts are listed there. You'll see wild rice, as well as the GABA and glutamate neurotransmitters. And you'll see soy noodles are listed there for glutamate. And cruciferous vegetables for GABA. GABA is something that is related to anxiety. We actually need more GABA to feel less anxious. So here's a list. So those images kind of highlight all of these whole foods that, when eaten in their natural form, help create this symphony of neurotransmitters that our body needs to have a healthy and reliable mood state. And for specific diseases or symptomologies, right? ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Typically, when we're prescribing medication, we're targeting dopamine or norepinephrine. And with anxiety, we're targeting serotonin, GABA, norepinephrine, lowering that histamine level. Depression, serotonin, dopamine, histamine. Bipolar disorder, a host of neurotransmitters. Schizophrenia, these neurotransmitters. If you or your child, if you're looking at this and you're going, oh my goodness, yes, this is a part of our symptomology or our family, or I don't know if that's my child, but I definitely see some symptoms. Choosing foods that are whole foods and decreasing those processed foods can help you or your child's body make more of what you need to have that nice, stable, reliable mood state. So that's the science, the nitty gritty of why it is important to make intentional choices about what your child eats and to prioritize it being whole foods, not processed foods. But how do we do that? Right? Great. I'm sure all of you would say, yes, absolutely. I want my child to eat real food. But how do you do that? How do you take a child who might be averse to certain foods or have a high level of resistance to change? The language that you use matters. We need to use strength-based language. And if you're not familiar with that term, I encourage you to jot it down. There's so much research on strength-based parenting and strength-based language. I'll give you a few examples in just a minute. Something else that's really important to be mindful of is that all real food fits. What I mean by that is if your child likes bananas and they don't like apples, that is fine. Enjoy eating bananas. Their taste and their microbiome and their palate can shift over time. We don't need to get distracted by children who are preferring certain kinds of foods in different types of seasons of their life. The quantity and preparation of food matters. Again, real food, right? So if you're eating real food and you're preparing it in a way right now that is highly covered with salt, sugar, or oil, see if there's a way for you to start to trade or decrease or eliminate that salt, sugar, and oil. We want to make sure that it is real and close to its natural state. I'm not talking completely raw, completely unflavored, or completely boring. I'm just saying be mindful that it's real food and making sure that we're having it in high quantities, but not ruining that nutritious property by covering it in salt, oil, and sugar. We absolutely want to minimize, eliminate shame-based language. Shame-based language is when we say, if you don't do that, then, or I can't believe you wouldn't. Shame-based language is blaming language. That can absolutely impair a child's willingness to try new things. It can activate that amygdala and they can shut down. We can lose them. What is absolutely vital for all parents and adults is to model the behaviors you want to see in your children. It's not a fun thing to hear from a child. Well, I haven't seen you try that. But the reality is they're watching, they're sponges. They want to see what you're asking of them, that you're doing it. So strength-based responses, again, strength-based parenting and strength-based language is key in getting buy-in from kids to do new things, especially around food. Saying something like, thank you for trying that. Activating that ventromedial prefrontal cortex and saying, you are so brave to try new things. You didn't used to like blueberries. I'm so proud of you for tasting that blueberry. Asking children, what did you think about that? You've never tasted that before. And listening to their answer. Asking kids about what they think, about how something feels in their mouth. You haven't tasted nuts before. How does that feel in your mouth? Oh, it feels kind of gritty, X, Y, or Z. Or if they're trying maybe like a pureed something that you've made. Oh, it felt kind of squishy. Engaging with them about their experience and finding it interesting can help them see the value in what they're doing. One of my favorite things to tell children is it's okay if they don't like something. One of the ways that you can say that is it's okay if you didn't like the way that tastes. Your tongue is learning something new. Help them give their body time to adjust and a willingness to continue being brave and exercising that part of their brain. Giving them their own language. Healthy food helps your body work well. That can be applied to a lot of different things, especially with water. For children who are really not interested in trying water, helping them associate drinking water with increasing their ability to do something that they like, such as focus and concentrate, get good grades, play sports, that can go a long way. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is not engaging in a power struggle. And one way that we can do that is to acknowledge when there is a limit. So if a child is really wanting something that they can't have, you can clarify, we are not going to eat that right now, but you can have an apple or banana. Which would you like? So giving them the opportunity to make the choice. And we don't engage in an argument, we just restate it. Okay, I understand that you don't want an apple or banana, but those are your choices. And if you'd like one, they'll be right here. And letting them make the choice when they're ready. But again, not engaging in a power struggle. The more that you practice this kind of language or you find what fits for you, the easier it is to use in real life, and children respond to it. Initially, parents typically say, that doesn't feel very natural, or that doesn't sound like me. But the more that you try it or play with different phrases and you see that your child responds, the easier it is to buy in and then keep using it. Modeling behaviors. One of the most important behaviors for parents to choose is to eat meals as a family at a table. There's so much research that supports eating meals at the dinner table, whatever that looks like in your home, most nights. This does not mean that every single night you have to have this rigorous schedule and this beautiful meal and all of these things. This is not to add a layer of stress to your life, but it is to say this in and of itself provides modeling healthy behaviors when you're eating the food that has been prepared. It also leads to opportunities for really great conversations and relationship building with your family. Model those behaviors of eating real foods. If you're not eating what your kids are eating or what you're asking of them, they're not going to do it. Limit digital activities while eating. This goes a long way to helping create mindfulness and a positive relationship with food. And then drink water. If you're not drinking water, your children are not going to want to drink water. So being mindful that we want to not only ask our children to do these wonderful, healthy things, but we want to be doing them ourselves. If you have specific concerns about your child's mood or their current relationship with food, or maybe there's just something there that you're feeling like, not really sure how this is going, I'd encourage you to talk with your pediatrician. Pediatricians are trained to do screening tests and conversations with parents and children, and they might validate that your child's doing just fine. They're on that developmental course that they're supposed to be. If they're concerned, they could refer you to a nutritionist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner like me, or a psychiatrist or a therapist who could help you have a more in-depth conversation about your child's mood. Food is not supposed to be stressful. And if that is feeling stressful right now, I hope that some of what we've discussed could help you take a new view or vantage point, and maybe you could try some of these phrases or ideas and decrease that level of stress that you're currently feeling. I'd love for you to know that there is hope for health for you and your children. I see that in my own life and in my patients' lives every day. And again, the research is coming, and there's so much good data out there for you to know that making these choices, even if they're difficult at first, it's okay. You haven't done this before. And it's okay if change is uncomfortable. But the reality is that health and happiness typically follows. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen tonight, and I hope that you found some of this information supportive and helpful in your journey with your children and their relationship with food. I think you're muted.
Well, dang, yes, I was.
I couldn't.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Winings. That is
You're
one of my
welcome.
trademarks, is to talk when the mic is off. So there we go. Great information. I have heard a lot of conversations and been involved in a lot of study about food, but I've never heard it quite from the perspective of the neurotransmitters and what each food provides. So that is super helpful. Thank you. I'm sure our listeners and viewers also found that useful and will be taking advantage of that information. We're going to save the questions to the end because we do have two other presenters, and we also have a little announcement to make right now. Plant Pure Communities has very generously been collaborating with Plant-Based Nutrition Movement to pull this event together. And we've been creating some great educational materials in conjunction with them. I'm going to have Jesse Stahl tell you about those. Jessie is the Advocacy and Programs Coordinator for Plant Pure Communities, and she'll tell you a little bit about the educational modules that we've been putting together. Go ahead, Jessie.
Great. Thank you so much, Meryl. I am so thrilled to be here with all of you this evening for this very important discussion. Thank you, Dr. Winings, for that wonderful presentation. I learned so much about our neuroanatomy and the connection between food and our emotions. Now that we have learned about this relationship, I would like to provide you all with some actionable steps that you can take to improve children's mental health and overall nutrition. We are excited to introduce Plant Pure Community's Healthy Childhood Nutrition course, previously called the Healthy School Food course. With the help of Meryl and Carrie at Plant-Based Nutrition Movement, we created new content about how food affects childhood development and mental health, tips and tricks for feeding your kids while traveling, how to navigate social situations with family and friends, and much more. In addition to the new information, the course also provides resources for working with school nutrition programs to improve the quality of the foods served at the schools in your community. And you can enroll for free today by clicking that, or there will soon be a link that pops up on the screen there. Yes, right there it is. You can click on that link to enroll in the course. And now I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to walk you through the course. Okay, perfect. So after clicking on that link that was flashing by earlier, you will be directed to this page. And to access the course, you'll click the Enroll for Free Today button. And you'll enter your contact information and sign up. And then after enrolling, you'll receive a confirmation email from Teachable with the link to access the course. And here is what the course looks like once you are logged in as a student. All of the lectures are listed on the left-hand side here, and you can choose to start, pause, or stop anywhere throughout the course. The first new lecture is Setting the Stage, Why Children's Nutrition Matters. This section provides an overview of why child nutrition is essential and why proper plant-based nutrition is optimal during pregnancy and while nursing for both you and baby. The following section is titled Children's Mental Health and Food, and touches on the link between food and children's susceptibility to chronic conditions, including behavior and mental health disorders. And the last new section is Kid-Friendly Healthy Eating at Home and on the Go. This lecture provides tips for packing healthy snacks while traveling on the road or in the air or perhaps to soccer games, and lists suggestions for navigating difficult conversations about your child's nutrition with family and friends. The lectures below include a variety of actions that you can take at your child's school to improve the quality of food served there. Some of these actions include starting a Meatless Monday campaign, or perhaps growing a school garden so that you can provide children with fresh fruits and vegetables. You will also find a list of many organizations you can partner with to implement these projects, and you can share your successes as well. We hope you find this course valuable and that it provides you with the tools you need to raise healthy, plant-based children. If you have any questions at all about the course, please email us at info@plantpurecommunities.org and we will get back to you. And now I'll hand it over to Meryl to introduce our next speakers, Antonia and Ariel.
Thanks, Jessie. So exciting. I hope everyone takes advantage of the course material and that Teachable's platform. One thing I also wanted to say is that plant-based nutrition movement has been working diligently on child nutrition now for coming up on 8 months or so. It's very important, and we realize the seriousness of how we feed our children. It's my poor family has to listen to me talk about this like endlessly every night. I get lots of practice. But one of the things that we know is that if we don't feed our children appropriately and healthy foods when they're young, they grow up almost in a rut, and they walk that same walk, and they eat processed foods, the standard American diet. It's encouraged in schools, it's encouraged in mass media, TV, it's encouraged through video games, it's encouraged all around us. Billboards all around us promote the world of standard American diet with fast food and highly processed foods. And this keeps our children thinking that that is really real food. And by the time they get to be 6 and 7, there they are in school, and then on to high school, it's the same thing. And by the time they're adults, you know what they have. Very much similar sorts of diseases that the adults all around them have, which are diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, all the standard American illnesses. So if we can interrupt that cycle when they're young so that they don't get on that path, on that treadmill, the world would be a much healthier place, truly. So that's the goal. And that's what the 6 Million Seeds Project is about. That's what this is a part of. 6 Million Seeds is the project that we're launching about child nutrition. 6 million kids we would like to be able to touch to get them to eat healthier foods. If we could get 6 million kids eating healthy, drinking water, avoiding processed foods, imagine how different the world would be. So that's what we're all about tonight. Let's move on to our next guests. We have Antonia Demas and Ariel Demas. Now, this is about child nutrition, this whole thing. And we have the honor of having these two ladies who are actually mother and daughter. I just love that. I just love it. So let me introduce Madam Mama Demas first. Dr. Antonia Demas has a PhD in education, nutrition, and anthropology from Cornell University. Her dissertation won 2 national awards for excellence in creativity. She's the founder and director of the Food Studies Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to improving the long-term health and education of children, their families, and the environment. Dr. Demas has worked for over 50 years developing food-based curricula and teaching food studies in a variety of educational settings with people of diverse ages, ethnicities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Because of her excitement about the learning and health improvements that occur among children when they have positive sensory-based experience with food-based education, she continues to engage in research to document this observation scientifically. She consults throughout the U.S. and abroad and trains teachers and health professionals as food educators. Welcome, Dr. Demas.
Thank you.
Yes. Next, we have Ms. Ariel Demas. She's a certified teacher with 15 years of experience implementing the Food is Elementary curriculum in public schools. Now, I don't think I said that over there, but that's the name of Antonia's curriculum, right? Food is Elementary. Ms. Demas collaborated with the Food Studies Institute to initiate the experiential Food is Elementary program in a Baltimore City public school. Last June, she joined the Food Studies Institute on a full-time basis, and she is excited to bring Food is Elementary program to as many schools as possible. Ms. Demas has also worked as a health educator for a hospital where she taught nutrition education and puberty education, among other health-related topics. Ms. Demas holds a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology from Cornell and a Master's of Arts in Education from Goddard College. Welcome to you both. I'm going to hand it over to you so you can tell us the story.
Okay, well, we are delighted to be here. And I would like to start by saying I did start my career 50 years ago. When I was a young woman, I worked at a Head Start center and I was a teacher there. I always have loved children and I've always loved food. I'm half Italian, so I'm obsessed with healthy food. And I thought I should concentrate my work at the Head Start Center on getting kids to eat healthy foods. And so I started cooking with them. And the parents and the other teachers said, there's no way they're going to eat these foods. They're too healthy. Kids hate healthy food. And this is an underlying issue that I've been addressing for the past 50 years. Kids will eat healthy foods if it's put in the curriculum, if it's fun, if they can share the experience with those around them, their peers, their parents, their families, and if they learn something about how it affects them and experiment on themselves. Try eating it and see how you feel after eating junk food and make a comparison. Kids are very smart and we don't give them enough credit. They're curious about the world. And instead of tapping into that curiosity, we make assumptions based on what we've been taught, like, no way will my kid ever touch this. Well, I have proven people who've said that wrong over and over and over again. And I'm very proud of that fact. And that was my impetus for doing this work for many years, and then at midlife, getting a PhD at Cornell, because I wanted to be able to get the data. So if we could have the first slide.
I'm going to pull up my slides now, and we will begin.
Okay. So when I was getting my PhD, I wanted to show the naysayers that kids were really not the problem. The problem was our education system. And I was concentrating on the school lunch program. This woman in the picture, Ellen Swallow Richards, sorry. I had never heard of her, but I was doing research on the history of the school lunch program, and her name kept coming up as somebody who had developed model lunch programs in the Boston area. And I had never heard of her before, so I got a biography because, like children, I was curious. Who is this woman? Well, when I read her biography, I was astounded. She is the woman who coined the word ecology. The School of Human Ecology, where I got my PhD at Cornell, would not exist if it had not been for her groundbreaking work. She applied science to air, water, and food quality. And she became the first woman to study at MIT. It took great perseverance because they would not allow women. They thought women could not study hard sciences, but she didn't give up, which is another important lesson. And she became the first female professor at MIT. She totally transformed the way we live today. And yet very few people have heard of her. So whenever I get an opportunity, I sing her praises because I feel an enormous debt for what she did to the environment and to our food sources. And she also was a wonderful educator who thought we were educating kids in schools the wrong way. She said we make them sit on a hard seat and not talk and not move. And that is not a natural way to teach children. So anyway, next slide, please.
Well, I'll go ahead and read the quote from Ellen Richards.
Oh, okay.
I believe it will be held a crime in the 20th century to lure young bodies and minds to college or school under the pretense of education, only to poison them slowly with bad food.
So she realized that the food, which we did not have all the junk foods then, they weren't invented. But she believed that they were poisoning kids and making it hard to learn. And she developed these model school lunch programs because there was no food in the school. The janitor sold pickles and candy bars to the kids if anything. So she was an early advocate for school meals being prepared by the government and offered to kids so they could have some nutrition in their bodies while they were trying to learn and study. Okay.
So I'm going to just read the slide and then Dr. Demas will fill in with some details. So she's going to speak about a food and behavior study that she did in Miami, Florida. And this was in 2001. Dr. Demas was hired to develop a culinary arts program at the Bay Point School for Boys. It was a residential school that admits boys who are referred by the courts for criminal behavior. And the culinary program was based on the Food is Elementary curriculum with positive responses from students and staff. And based on that success, she designed a pilot study to see if health and behavior would actually change if the students adopted a strict whole foods plant-based diet for 3 weeks. There were 19 students that volunteered for the study, and they cooked and ate all their own meals, and they drank 8 glasses of water a day, and the results were dramatic. All the students showed improvements in grade point averages, athletic performance, non-aggressive behavior, acne, strength, and overall well-being. Most of the students also reported weight loss after 3 weeks. A number of the students received full scholarships to Johnson & Wales, the culinary and hospitality school. And one student actually, he received one of those scholarships and he traveled up to Ithaca, New York to give a guest lecture in Dr. Colin Campbell's nutrition class at Cornell University.
When he gave that guest lecture, there wasn't a dry eye in the classroom. And he started out by saying, I grew up on the streets of Miami. I expected to spend my life dodging the police to stay out of jail. I never would have believed that food had anything to do with my anger or my antisocial behavior until I did this experiment on myself. And that proved to me that food really is where it's at. It's not criminal behavior or joining gangs. He was recruited to be in a gang, and that's got him in the school. So I had found, and I was confident to do this with these guys, because I had found with younger kids, their behavior problems, when they existed, would disappear if they could get out of their seats, learn how to cook, to eat different foods that were healthy, and have the peer influence as a positive, because it really addressed different learning styles. Most of us learn best through sensory-based education, but yet most schools just teach cognition primarily. And when you have all 5 senses engaged in the learning experience, you have a lot more to draw upon when you're trying to remember something for a test, or just remember in general and make connections. So I knew that with younger kids, behavior really improved if they had sensory-based education. And I tried it with these teenagers who people would say to me, you're going to Miami and you're going to be with big guys and big knives. And I said, yeah. And I'm going to tell them that this is a life skill that I want them to learn. And if they misbehave, then they're going to get kicked out of the program and they won't know how to take care of themselves. And so we had a really fun time learning the nutrition lessons and the curriculum, and they were so cooperative. I also worked with the cooks in the school, and it was all junk food. It was all processed junk food. But they enjoyed cooking. They were very creative in developing recipes. So I decided it would be interesting to develop a pilot program to see if anything changed if the students only ate plant-based foods. Miami Children's Hospital volunteered to do pre and post testing on their medical status. They took blood pre and post. The kids were there because of behavior, so their behavior was constantly monitored. And I had them all keep journals, which was I said, I want you to be honest with yourself about any differences in the way you feel. If you feel worse, write it down. I want to know this because you're doing an experiment on yourself, and you need to know if it's working or not. So here's a picture of there was a North Campus and a South Campus, and there were a lot more students at the school, but 19 volunteered to give up 3 weeks and try this experiment. And the picture, you can see that they had a very artistic sense because we talked about aesthetics all the time. And they were just perfect gentlemen. They behaved beautifully and they loved being creative and coming up with their own recipes. They knew it had to all be plant-based. And it was a great place to do research because they were basically imprisoned. And so they couldn't eat anything other than what the school provided or what they cooked. And at first, the kids who weren't part of the pilot would tease them and say, oh, you're going to be weak like a girl. You're eating like a rabbit. And then my guy said, well, look at our food and look at yours. Yours looks horrible and ours looks beautiful. And so by the end of the 3 weeks, a lot of the other students wanted to join. And Ariel's going to share some of the journal entries that show great insight. And I think the journals, which I still have the hard copies of, I think they demonstrate that the boys were really thinking about this.
So here are some quotes from the students from the North Campus. The other slide was from the South Campus. So one student said in his journal, I loved how this experiment made me feel overall. I feel like I am a whole new person. I also feel that I am purified and cleansed from head to toe. I am comprehending on a higher level now in school thanks to this experiment. And then the other student said, I really just want to go donate some of this energy to the people here who are always so weary. He wanted to share his energy, which is so great. So again, these are just a few excerpts from their journals, which are on the website, foodstudies.org. So I'm doing this diet because I believe it makes my body healthier, keeps my skin clearer, and keeps me thinking more positively than usual. I was motivated to try this diet because a lot of people were telling me it could help the way I felt about life, keep me healthy, and because it is enjoyable food. At first, I didn't believe any of this so I decided to try it myself, and I'm happy I made this decision. All the results I thought could never happen from this diet ended up working, plus more, so I have decided to continue the diet and try to talk to my family and friends into trying it as well. And another student says, today I woke up with more energy and felt good about the day. I worked all day long in the cafeteria, cleaning and stocking things, and I didn't get as tired as I felt I would. When I finished cleaning the cafeteria, I went out and played basketball and still felt a lot of strength in my body. In a way, I don't believe this because it doesn't seem that food could do so much good for the way I think, feel, and act. This was the first day in Bay Point since I haven't felt tired for the whole day. I think I feel this way because from drinking all of the water, I am running out all of the red meat and unhealthy foods through my body and cleaning it out. Another student wrote, today was a good day for me. I was thankful that my graduation for this study is this week, and I will be able to tell other people how food can make an effect on the mind and as well as the body. I'm just keeping my focus on making a goal to stay with this diet. I will be completing my goal to stay on this diet for sure because I enjoy it, and I have learned a lot of how to cook my own food and about health as well. So some of the self-reported results or changes that the students expressed are more energy, not fighting with peers or staff. They felt more calm, improved self-esteem, improved concentration and listening skills, increased energy and stamina. They felt better physically, cleared up digestive issues. They had weight loss. They felt a cleansing and they were no longer constipated. Improved grades, improved sports performance, clearer skin, improved sleep, improved communication skills, and they wanted to share it with others.
That was one of the really wonderful outcomes. They wanted to pass it on. Basically, we are walking chemistry experiments when we eat junk food. We don't know the results, but we are getting more and more evidence that it's really not good for our health. And these guys did this study, and they just felt like different people, and the purifying and cleansing of their body they could really relate to, because in their short lives, they had not had most, if any, of these foods. It was all processed junk food, basically. And so they really cleaned out and they wanted to share, which was, I thought, a very beautiful outcome of it, among other things. So, okay.
So for some reason, the pictures didn't show up
On
in
this one
platform, even though that,
so
sorry.
I was really excited about dealing with high school students who were incarcerated because of the response I got. And so this was a similar school in California where it was teenage boys who were incarcerated. And I was invited to work with them because the state of California had given them a health grant to build a school garden. And we have a picture, which you can't see right now, of the farmer who taught them organic gardening and the garden. But here they were eating all their meals at this school, and they had no access to other food other than what was provided for them at the school until the garden came along. But they did not coordinate with the cafeteria to make these foods available in the menu because there was no money involved to make the link. And so this garden provided beautiful organic produce, and the kids learned how to grow the food, but there was no plan to take it to the level that it should be at. And so I worked with a student, and we figured out how much money the school would save if they just started incorporating some of these veggies. The veggies were donated to homeless people instead of going into the school menu. And it seems really illogical, and it is, but that's the way things operate, I found over and over again. We need a comprehensive plan to put it all together and keep it going if we're going to have sustainable programs to really change the people who need behavior change or need academic change. It has to be consistent, and it needs to be more like the program that Ms. Demas did in Baltimore, which is a permanent part of that school curriculum from pre-K to 8th grade, every kid in that school gets food literacy education every single year that they are there. And it sticks with them and they remember it, and it's paid for because the principal really believes that this is wonderful education, and he will talk to any other principal or educator about the importance of having this type of education. So I really feel that we need a whole new paradigm in the way we educate kids. I think Ellen Richards was right that we're educating them all wrong. We're not honoring their curiosity about the world. And we have assumptions that are not borne out, at least through my research. I have yet to be in a situation where the kids were resistant to this. They really have a great time, and it works. So this is just one simple quote. I didn't know how good these foods were until I tried them. And again, we don't introduce new exotic foods. I've had kids eat the most unusual foods like seaweed and dandelion greens, and I purposely put them in the curriculum and teach as much as I can about it. And the kids claim that these are their new favorite foods, and I have a lot of data to demonstrate that. So our assumptions are all wrong about kids from my experience, and we need to change that, because without giving kids the intellectual tools and practical tools they need, they're going to get heart disease and diabetes at younger and younger ages, which diabetes had to be renamed from adult onset because children were getting it. So we need to do something about this through our schools, and we need to do it immediately, because we are in deep trouble in terms of the way we're educating our kids in terms of behavior, and this type of education really changes that. So I think that getting comprehensive programs in place should be a national priority, and it will really help prevent the acceleration of climate change, which is at a real tipping point right now. And they're going to inherit a climate that's super unhealthy if something isn't done. And the way we grow food is a major contributor. So people don't want to look at education as a solution, but from my 50 years of experience, it's really the most viable option, and it needs to start, and it needs to be fun, and it needs to not have judgment or blaming or shaming. It needs to not be like a religion saying thou must eat this way or else. We need to give kids access to accurate information, and they're not getting it. They're getting access to inaccurate information from the food industry for the most part. And schools, I think, need to take a dominant role in changing that.
Yeah, and not only will the healthy food make the children healthy and think clearly and feel good in terms of affecting their mood, it will actually, having this type of class in school is fun for them. So it'll make learning fun. They can learn about different academic concepts by studying food. And
other cultures.
And it can be just they come together in the school and they get to work together and collaborate and problem solve. And it's a really good thing for their mood on a topical way and also on a deeper level in terms of affecting their nutrition and their physical development.
Okay, next. So this is something that I wrote with a student intern. Can vegetables cure crime? We don't look at food as a source of anger. And I tried to get funding after that Miami study, and they said there's nothing in it in the literature. And I did a literature review, and there was hardly anything on nutrition other than supplements, which are not the same as real food. So I think the time is right to really look at having healthy nutrition that's not imposed on people, but something that they learn about, and they learn about the relationship between food and mood, as our previous speaker was talking about, and how it affects them. And they do experiments on themselves by eating healthy food and eating junk food and seeing how they feel. I think the time is here for us to take action to do this type of promotion in our school system.
Yeah, and I would like to just echo what Dr. Winings said about the strength-based responses. That's definitely the approach that we take with children. Being brave, it's really nice to hear that that's backed up neurologically and scientifically, because we talk about that a lot, and the kids are often very fearful at first, but if you institute a no yuck rule and nobody's allowed to say anything negative about the food, the ones who are a little bit fearful actually get curious seeing the other students respond, and that invites them in. And so it's sort of a positive peer pressure that really, really works. And also just modeling and engaging them in conversation, engaging them in cooking. Let your kids cook. That will get them eating healthy, because they will be invested in the outcome, and they'll be curious about tasting it, even if it's just stirring oatmeal when they're little. And it definitely not getting involved in a power struggle. So I appreciate the term strength-based responses, which I hadn't heard before, but we totally agree.
Yeah, food habits are notoriously hard to change, especially as one gets older. So starting with kids is an easy way to go about it. Yet the educators who are also not educated about nutrition for the most part, it hasn't been part of their schooling. So they need to know that, and their jobs will become easier if they get the kids healthier and wanting to eat really healthy foods. It's a win-win situation, but it's got to start happening in more places.
So we ended just a couple minutes early. We are done.
All right. Beautiful work. I love that. I love what you've been saying about the school in Miami. That's just so powerful. You know,
Yeah,
no one would know. No one would guess. And
those
certainly the way they are fed in an incarcerated Department of Corrections location generally is not anything about fresh, healthy, whole fruits and vegetables. That's just not what they're getting, right?
No.
Yeah. Well, we have a few questions. Maybe we could bring Dr. Winings on screen at the same time. There she is. And we'll just, and Jessie, yes. And we'll just pitch some questions. Quick reminder, we do have the Healthy Childhood Nutrition course that Jessie was talking about earlier. If we could put the URL up for that so that people do know there's access to this information. And this whole presentation and event is been recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel. So let's get to one of the first questions. And whoever feels like they are best equipped to answer this, or if you have something to say about it, please let us know. So we got one question while people were registering. They were sending in questions. One question is, how can I help my child who has big feelings or difficulty with impulses? How can I help my child without using drugs? Dr. Winings, maybe you have an answer for that one.
Yeah. So I'm going to restate the question. How can I support my child's neurotransmitters and brain without using prescription medication?
Beautiful.
And I think it's a valid question, and I get it every day that I'm in clinic. I would say two things. The first is we have really reliable data on some medication, and medical interventions are not all bad. So I think this question matters case by case, and the severity of a child's symptoms or presentations are what is key. So if a child is unable to function in multiple settings, we might need to take a two-pronged approach. So I don't want individuals to hear that we should never use medical interventions, such as medication at times, or therapy. So from a mental health standpoint, I am an advocate for therapy always, and therapy first. And what I mean by therapy is talk therapy or play therapy, depending on the age of the child. And then we look at nutrition. So if we start in therapy, we increase those whole foods, we increase that hydration, we might mitigate all the concerns for medication. However, if not, find a prescriber that you trust. Start low, go slow, make sure that you're working with someone who respects your desire to have no medication. But I think that's key, is looking at therapy, addressing the child's needs, as well as paying attention to that nutrition. And then if medication is needed, make sure that you're working with someone that is going to be mindful of potentially deprescribing in the future. So that's another conversation, but deprescribing is absolutely something that can happen. If your child is on medication, they're no longer symptomatic, work with your prescriber and ask if you could deprescribe.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Demas, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would add, do not buy foods that have dyes in them, and read the labels very carefully to see. Many things that we consume have no whole foods in them. They may have 100 ingredients, none of which are whole foods. So I would have the parent or caregiver or teacher learn how to read labels, because reading labels can be confusing, and you really need to know what you're eating, and try to avoid all the chemical additives, because many of them have not been studied in combination. And I do an exercise on natural strawberry flavoring, which has just an ungodly number of ingredients, none of them whole foods. And when you realize that, you start asking questions. And to me, that's when real learning takes place. Like, what am I consuming? This doesn't have any food in it. It doesn't make sense. And you realize how they hide how many different kinds of sugar might be in it. And the goal, I think, is to provoke thought, so you ask your own questions and explore yourself what the answers are.
Great. Beautiful. Thank you. Ariel? Nothing to add. All right. Perfect. All right. Next question. How do I handle it when my family or husband or my parents are not supportive of changing my child's diet? And what if they're actually undermining the change? This is a tough one, especially around the holiday times. How about Ms. Ariel? You were quiet the last time. Anything?
I would say, it's tricky if they're undermining it, like sneaking them food you don't want them to eat. But I would say, as much as possible, just try to avoid the power struggle, even with your adult family members, because the more attention you pay to it, the more powerful they feel, whether they know it or not. And I would just say, try not to judge what other people eat. And if you're not being judgy, then if somebody's having a lot of comments that are undermining your situation and your goals and what you're trying to do with your kids, then maybe you can just try and gently say, you know, I'm not judging you. I wish you wouldn't judge me. Just let's try and keep the peace.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Certainly. Yeah. Dr. Winings?
I completely agree. I think when we're mindful of eliminating power struggles around food, whether that's between the adults or the child or children or teenagers, it can help diffuse situations. And I love that you said whether or not they know it makes them feel powerful. And so I think that's key. And I like to think of like bobbing and weaving. So if there's an element where you're thinking, oh, this could be a power struggle, how can you move through it in a way that is peaceful? And then having those adult conversations as adults privately. So that's the only thing I would add is if there is something really you're feeling like I need to address this with the person I'm co-parenting with or the person that is doing these behaviors with your child, you can do that in a respectful way, but do it in private, not in front of the children or teenagers.
And I would like to add, it's one area that the kid really does have power because the kid is not going to be force-fed. And if the child or the family members sees other people enjoying it, and if the food looks attractive, you know, so many people don't take the time to make the food look appealing. If it looks attractive, then people are more likely to eat it because we really do eat with our eyes first. And get them to smell it and take a little taste, but never force feed, never force any food on a person, and they will come around. They'll be curious and they'll see other people. That's why schools are such a great place to do this because of the peer pressure. When I was doing my work, there's one kid who started crying, and I said, nobody's going to force you to eat anything. You can just sit there and, you know, it's up to you. And he became so curious, seeing how excited his classmates were, that I didn't bring attention to it. The other kids brought attention to it. So he timidly started eating the food, and they said, oh my goodness, he's eating it. And they said, you're so brave, and we're so proud of you. And so he got positive feedback from the other kids. But if you make a spectacle about it, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and especially the modeling, things we don't even realize we say in front of children. I mean, teachers and parents do it all the time. Oh, he doesn't like broccoli, you know. I mean, we're teaching them not to like it. So you have to really check yourself as the adult in the room.
Yeah, and even as infants, when we're feeding them vegetables, a lot of parents make really contorted faces instead of,
You try it.
and those are subliminal but real messages
Very
that they're
powerful.
getting, and starting with the first food. So we need to be very aware of how we introduce foods.
One last thing, as a teacher,
go ahead.
You have a real benefit as a teacher to be teaching kids to eat healthy without the kids there, without the parents there.
Yes.
You're not at the dinner table. The baggage is not in the classroom. It might enter, it might pop up, but it's just a more neutral environment. And then if you bring the parents in to an event where there's food that the kids have made, you know, I've had parents come in and be like, wait, my kid made that? Like, what? So, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. That actually answered my next question. So that's great. I'm going to segue to what do you think healthcare professionals need to know about the connection between food and mood, and especially for children who are struggling to manage big emotions?
I'd like to speak to that. I think what would be nice is just to acknowledge it exists. And as a healthcare professional, I had to petition to do my doctoral work on this, and it was only 10 years ago. And I can't imagine even further back, you know, to hear that the efforts that you went through, Dr. Demas, to advocate for this work. And so I think if we could just start acknowledging within healthcare that what we eat matters, period, and the data will come. I think your journal entries from those children are so profound, because the reality is they just had this tiny snapshot of time and they were already articulating the impact. And so if healthcare providers could be more curious, I think we would see a higher uptake on some of these experiments, and even if it is for a week at a time, then there's going to be more buy-in, because our bodies change. Our bodies want to be well.
And I also think that it's important for schools to model good nutrition behavior. That's why I've been advocating for healthy school lunches forever, and came across Ellen Richards' name. But giving ice cream bars as rewards. I did a study in Indiana where the kids were given this dilly bar. I never heard the name before, at the end of the year by the music teacher. And the kids learned about nutrition and they got really excited about healthy foods. And the last day of school, the music teacher gave out the dilly bar, and the kids looked, and these were elementary kids, looked at the label and read it, and they said, no, we can't eat this. It has no real food in it. And they rejected it. So the kids are way smarter than people give them credit for. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to be sick. They don't want to have stomach aches. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be constipated all the time. And that's what a lot of kids feel every day. So if they can experience feeling like some of those Miami kids wrote about, cleansed, which is what their body needs, it will make a big difference.
Beautiful. So good. This is just so powerful. I hope there are medical professionals who are hearing this and absorbing it. I know we had a couple of comments from some medical folk. There is no comparison to what healthy food can do.
And it's not their fault, because they weren't trained in nutrition.
Correct.
So they're doing what they know. And there needs to be comprehensive education for medical people.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Dr. Winings?
I was just going to share, I know that for the sake of tonight, we're discussing children and nutrition. However, these effects are not limited to children. It happens for adults too. And with the Plant Strong retreats, we see what she described in those journal entries in our adult participants. And we do offer continuing education if there are medical professionals who want to come and experience this for themselves. Or as a parent, if you're thinking, I don't know if I can model that behavior yet. The starting place might be for you to start being curious. Obviously, you're here. If you're listening, there's some sense of curiosity about this relationship. So the more that you start implementing whole food nutrition and increasing water, the easier it's going to be to model those behaviors for your children.
So true. So true. I met Dr. Winings at a Plant Strong retreat. Powerful experience for 6 days to be immersed in nothing but education, positive support, and whole food, plant-based, sumptuous foods. Just amazing. Well recommended if you are on the fence, shall we say, or not quite sure, or just need a tribe to be with for a week or longer. It's a great way to start. And certainly what you learn as adults impacts the children in your life, just as what the children learn impact what the adults do going forward. Let's see, couple more questions. One of our viewers wanted to know about food sensitivities. So there's a two-part question here. First of all, how do you know if there's a correlation between a behavior or a symptom, a sign or something, and a food? And then how do you confirm that sensitivity?
I'd like to speak to that. If you have a specific concern you can, for an allergy, you can work with an allergist or those sorts of things. The reality is that elimination diets are helpful for learning what certain triggers are. So what I mean by that is simplifying what is being eaten. So you might be eating brown rice and some whole foods like raw veggies or fruit. The reality is that data is still growing, and we do have some data on gluten, but it's not substantial. And so where the data does scream is if 80% of what you eat is whole food, plant-based, mostly water as well for that hydration piece, you mitigate the risk for sensitivities and symptoms. And the reason that's important is individuals who have had substantial sensitivities or inability to eat certain foods, once that amount of whole foods shifts, the microbiome shifts, the body's ability to tolerate and digest improves. And so again, I'm speaking directly towards real food. So it is important that you're reading those labels, because if you're consuming things that you weren't aware of, like additives or artificial flavorings or colors or dyes, those may be causing problems. Sometimes cruciferous vegetables could cause bloating or discomfort. But the reality is, if that is that 80% whole food plant-based, and over time, your body becomes really efficient at eliminating some of those other things that might sneak in. So I know that's kind of a general answer to a specific question, but that's where the data is very strong. And so if there's a more specific concern, I would say you might need to speak with a healthcare professional about that.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Well, I am sorry to say we are just about out of time. We kind of need to wrap it up. So I'd like to get just a couple really quick 30-second bite-size parting comments from each of you, and then we will be signing off. Let's start with the lady who started it all 50 years ago. I'm so honored that you are here with us. I can't tell you how full my heart is to have all three of you here, but certainly Dr. Demas, give us your parting comment. 30-second soundbite.
Education works. We have to advocate for education, starting once the kid's born.
Beautiful. Thank you. Ms. Demas, Ariel, you next.
Let them cook. Teach your kids how to cook. Get them involved. That's the magic bullet, if there ever is one.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Winings, how about you?
Eat real food and make it fun.
Beautiful. I want to thank all three of you for being here and sharing in this conversation, giving us your wisdom, imparting your knowledge. This is a conversation that is rarely held and so needs to be a common topic, from before we're born, during gestation, right through till the day we leave this earth. We need to be giving, eating, sharing healthy food and knowing what to do with it when we have it, how to cook it, how to grow it. That's a whole nother conversation. On that note, we will bid everyone good night. Once again, I want to remind everyone we have the Healthy Childhood Nutrition course at the URL that's been flashing up on the screen periodically. There it goes, with Plant Pure Communities. Please take advantage of that. Look for, here we are, 6 million seeds. We are growing and getting more information out, coming together, bringing people together to get this conversation to be more common in the world. Jesse, anything you want to say one last time? We got 30 seconds. Go.
Let's see, sorry, I was muted there. We invite you to enroll in the free course. There's a lot of really great content there and a lot of different organizations that you can work with to improve your children's nutrition. So,
all right.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody. Love you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.